You know what your problem is, he said, his voice thick with contempt. You think throwing money at everything makes you important. But you're still just a burden. Still alone. Still nothing. I stared at my phone, frozen, as his words echoed from the video my uncle had sent by mistake. The screen showed a shaky angle of a dinner table I hadn't been invited to, faces I knew too well, voices I'd spent my whole life trying to please. I was sitting alone in my small apartment in Portland, surrounded by furniture that didn't quite match and groceries bought on sale, living proof of how carefully I managed every dollar. And yet for 4 years straight, without missing a single month, I had been paying his mortgage. My name is Maya, and I was 32 years old when that video shattered the story I'd been telling myself. I wasn't rich. I wasn't flashy. I worked as a logistics coordinator for a shipping company, steady job, decent income, nothing anyone would brag about at a dinner table. But I was responsible. I always had been. I was the one who showed up, the one who fixed things quietly, the one who handled problems so no one else had to. My father raised me and my older brother alone after my mother died when I was 7. He worked construction his whole life, came home tired, angry, closed off. Grief turned him hard. Responsibility turned him bitter. And somewhere along the way, I became invisible while my brother became untouchable. The video had come in late on a Tuesday night. My uncle had sent it with a casual message, something like, "Thought you should see this." He hadn't meant to include me. I was never meant to hear what they said when I wasn't in the room. I watched it again, forcing myself not to look away. My father sat at the head of the table, beer in hand, relaxed, laughing. My brother leaned back in his chair, smug, comfortable. Someone joked about the mortgage, about how generous I'd been. My father snorted and waved it off. "She owes me," he said. "I put a roof over her head for 18 years. This is just payback. Besides, what else does she have going on? No husband. No kids. Might as well be useful." They laughed. My brother laughed the loudest. I stopped the video before I could hear anything else. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set the phone down. I'd sent $2,000 every month for 4 years. $96,000. Almost $100,000. For a man who thought of me as a burden that finally paid off. The worst part wasn't the insult. It was how easy it was for them. No hesitation. No guilt. Just casual cruelty served alongside dinner. I looked around my apartment. The couch I'd bought secondhand. The table I'd assembled myself. The curtains I'd sewn because buying new ones felt irresponsible. I'd told myself I was being practical. That helping him mattered more than upgrading my own life. That someday it would mean something. My phone buzzed again. Another message from my uncle, apologetic this time. "Didn't mean to send that. Let's just forget it." Forget it. I sat there for a long time, the video paused on my father's smirk. Part of me wanted to call him immediately, to scream, to demand an explanation. But another part of me, quieter and sharper, told me to wait. Think. Plan. The mortgage payment was due in less than 2 weeks. I didn't sleep that night. I replayed the video over and over until every word burned itself into my memory. By morning, something inside me had shifted. The sadness was still there, but it was hardening into something else. Growing up, I'd learned early where I stood. When I was 10, I showed my father a drawing I'd made at school. He barely glanced at it before telling me to go play outside. My brother laughed and called it stupid. When I made honor roll in high school, my father said, "At least you're not useless." When my brother barely graduated, he got a party and a car. I left for college on a partial scholarship and worked 2 jobs to cover the rest. My father never offered help. "You're smart," he said. "Figure it out." So I did. After graduation, I moved states away for work, thinking distance might soften things. It didn't. I still called every week. Still came home for holidays. Still tried. Then 4 years ago, he called me. His voice was different, unsure. He said retirement wasn't enough. The mortgage was drowning him. The bank was sending letters. He might lose the house. I can't ask your brother, he said. He's got his own family. I remember the feeling that bloomed in my chest then. Not pride. Not love. Something closer to hope. He needed me. I asked how much. 2,000 a month. It was a stretch, but I could make it work. I said yes without hesitating. That was the moment everything locked into place. Me sacrificing. Him taking. And everyone pretending it meant something else. Now, sitting in silence with the truth laid bare, I opened my banking app. Scrolled through the payments. Month after month. Year after year. I added them up slowly, deliberately. $96,000. Money I could have used to build my own future. Money that bought me nothing but contempt. My phone rang. His name flashed on the screen. I didn't answer. Neither did I answer when my brother called. Or when the texts came telling me not to be sensitive, not to overreact, that it was just family talk. I opened my laptop instead. I pulled every bank statement. Every confirmation email. Every message mentioning the mortgage. I saved them all in one place. Then, for the first time, I called the mortgage company myself. The account was in good standing. More than that, the representative casually mentioned the loan would be fully paid off in 6 months. 6 months. After 4 years of my payments, he was almost free. And I wondered, dimly, if he would have told me when it happened. Or if he would have kept letting me send money, smiling, laughing, calling me a burden over dinner. I hung up feeling strangely calm. The next payment was due in 12 days. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I felt ready. The calm didn't last in a peaceful way, it lasted in a dangerous way, like the moment right before a storm finally decides where it's going to land. I went to work the next day like nothing was wrong. I coordinated shipments, answered emails, smiled at people in the hallway, nodded through meetings, and the whole time my brain was doing math. Not the kind you write down, the kind that keeps running in the background. 2,000 a month. 4 years. 96,000. 6 months left. And somehow my father still had the nerve to call me useful, like that was the best compliment he could offer. My brother, Calvin, started texting by noon. Dad says you're ignoring him. You're really doing this over a stupid joke. Don't be dramatic, Maya. It's embarrassing. I didn't respond. I didn't even open half of them. I just let them stack up like receipts, proof of how quickly they switched from laughing at me to demanding I behave. On Thursday night, my best friend, Tessa, called. We'd been friends since college, the kind of friend who knows what your silence means before you do. Okay, she said as soon as I picked up. What happened? I didn't even ease into it. I sent her the video and stayed on the line while she watched. When she finished, there was a pause. Not the awkward kind, the kind where a person is choosing their next words carefully because they don't want to underreact. Tessa, I said quietly, I've been paying his mortgage for 4 years. I know, she said, her voice tight. And that's why this is, wow. That's not even cruel, that's shameless. My throat burned. I feel stupid. No, she snapped, like she refused to let me say it. You were generous. You were loyal. You were trying to do the right thing in a situation that never deserved you. I stared at my kitchen table, at the neat little stack of mail, at the budgeting notebook I kept like it was a second job. I'm stopping the payments. Good, she said instantly. But I'm not doing it quietly. That got her attention. Okay. Tell me. I told her about the folder on my laptop, the statements, the confirmations, the texts. I told her I wanted to send everything to the entire extended family, and not just them. I wanted the truth to be impossible to ignore. I wanted everyone who had ever laughed at the dinner table to finally have to sit with what they were laughing about. He's going to lose his mind, she warned. Let him, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. Tessa exhaled slowly. He might retaliate. He already did, I said, and that was the part that felt almost funny in the worst way. He retaliated for decades, I just didn't call it that. I called it family. After we hung up, I stayed at my table for hours, building something that felt less like revenge and more like a record. A timeline. A truth so organized and clean it couldn't be argued away as emotion. I didn't write a dramatic message. I didn't write a long speech. I wrote it like a person who had nothing left to prove. I'm sharing this so everyone understands what's been happening. For 4 years, I've been paying my father's mortgage, $2,000 every month. Attached is documentation of every payment. Attached is a video that provides context. I will not be making any future payments. That's it. Simple. Flat. Unavoidable. Then I made a list of recipients. The usual family members, my uncle who accidentally sent the video, the aunt who called me useless at the table, cousins who were always too busy to invite me but never too busy to gossip. And then I went wider. My father's church friend who always hugged me too hard at Christmas. The neighbor who used to say, "Your dad's such a good man." Anyone who might have heard his version of the story in the future. If he was going to paint me as the villain, I wanted the receipts to speak first. But I still didn't hit send. Not yet. The payment was due on Monday. I wanted him to feel the silence. I wanted him to wake up and realize the money didn't arrive, and in that moment, I wanted the truth to detonate everywhere at once. The weekend was torture. I tried to do normal things. Grocery run. Laundry. A long walk through the neighborhood. Portland looked like a postcard that weekend, crisp air, leaves turning, people smiling like the world wasn't full of betrayal. I kept thinking about my mother, the only person who ever looked at me like I mattered without conditions. If she were alive, would she tell me to forgive him? Or would she tell me to stop bleeding myself dry for a man who called love a transaction? On Sunday night, I sat at my table again, laptop open, email waiting in drafts like a loaded switch. My phone rang. Dad. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then answered, because I wanted to hear the truth without the audience this time. About time, he said, like I'd done something wrong by protecting my own peace. You've been avoiding my calls. I've been busy, I said. Too busy for your own father? He didn't wait for an answer. I'm just checking, you're sending the payment tomorrow, right? Mortgage is due. Not how are you? Not I'm sorry. Not I didn't mean it. Just, the money. I felt something settle in my chest, cold and clean. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about that. He scoffed. About what? I'm not sending it. There was silence, like his brain refused to process it. What? I'm not sending the mortgage payment. His voice sharpened instantly. Maya, don't play games. That money needs to hit tomorrow. Then you'll need to pay it. You can't just stop, he snapped. We had an agreement. An agreement. Like I'd signed a contract to be humiliated. We had an agreement where I pay, and you laugh about me being your cash cow at dinner. His breathing changed. Defensive now. Your uncle shouldn't have sent you that. But he did, I said, and my voice stayed calm, which seemed to irritate him more. So now I know. It was just talk, he insisted. Family jokes. You're twisting it. You called me worthless, I said. You said I'm only useful because I don't have a husband or kids. You let everyone laugh. That's not twisting anything. He shifted tactics fast. Be reasonable. Where am I supposed to get $2,000 by tomorrow? And that right there was the moment I realized how deep the rot went. He wasn't asking me to help him. He was asking me to save him from the consequences of a life built on entitlement. I don't know, I said. And I don't care. That's your problem. You're selfish, he spat. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because it was predictable. Selfish was his favorite weapon. Anytime I asked for basic respect, he called it selfish. Anytime I refused to be used, he called it selfish. It was the easiest way to make me doubt myself. But I wasn't doubting myself anymore. Goodbye, I said, and I hung up. My phone immediately rang again. Dad. Then Calvin. Then Dad again. I flipped it over and let it buzz itself tired. Then I opened my laptop. I pulled up the email draft. I hovered over the send button for a moment, and what surprised me was the feeling. I expected rage. I expected grief. What I felt was clarity, like a door finally closing behind me. I clicked send. I scheduled it for 6 a.m, Monday. Not because I wanted to be cruel, but because I wanted maximum truth. Morning coffee time. Early scrolling. No excuses. No distraction. People would see it before he could spin it. I barely slept. My mind kept racing, not with guilt, but with anticipation. Like my body knew something irreversible was coming. Monday morning, at 6:03 a.m, the first notification hit my phone. Then another. Then my screen started filling so fast it looked like it was glitching. Missed calls. Texts. Voicemails. People reacting in real time to a truth that had been sitting under the table for years, just waiting for someone to finally flip it over. I made breakfast anyway. Eggs, toast, coffee. Slow. Deliberate. Like I was proving to myself that I wasn't going to panic, not anymore. At 7 o'clock, I finally picked up my phone. 40+ missed calls. Dozens of texts. And the first one I opened was from my uncle. Maya, I'm so sorry. I swear I didn't know he felt that way. Please call me. Right behind it was my aunt. Why would you air private family business? This is humiliating. Then my brother. You're destroying this family over a joke. Grow up. And then my father, message after message, each one more furious than the last. How dare you? After everything I did for you. You're dead to me. I stared at those words longer than I expected to. Dead to me. He'd been killing my self-worth in tiny pieces my whole life, and now he was acting like I'd committed the unforgivable crime by refusing to keep funding him. I set the phone down again, took a sip of coffee, and felt the storm finally arrive. And this time I wasn't going to run from it. By mid-morning, the fallout had taken on a life of its own. I was supposed to be at work, but I called in and asked to work from home. My voice sounded steady enough that my manager didn't push. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open. And my phone beside it, watching messages pile up like waves hitting the shore, each one louder than the last. Some were angry. Some were defensive. Some were dripping with guilt that arrived far too late. But a few stopped me cold. A cousin I barely spoke to wrote, I had no idea you were paying his mortgage. I'm so sorry. What he said about you was disgusting. Then another, from one of my father's neighbors. Your dad never mentioned any of this. He always talked about how hard things were for him. I'm shocked. I felt something shift in my chest. Not relief. Not satisfaction. Just the strange realization that the story I'd lived inside for decades wasn't invisible anymore. People were finally seeing what I'd been carrying alone. Then a message came in that made my stomach drop. It was from someone at my father's church. Is it true you were paying his mortgage this whole time? Because he's been receiving monthly assistance from the church hardship fund for years. I reread it 3 times. Hardship fund. My hands went cold. I didn't respond right away. I stared at the screen, my mind racing, trying to reconcile that message with everything I thought I knew. He couldn't have been. Could he? My phone rang before I could spiral too far. A calm, professional voice introduced herself as Catherine, the treasurer at the church my father had attended for 2 decades. She explained slowly, carefully, like she was speaking to someone in shock. For 3 years, my father had been receiving monthly financial assistance. He had claimed he was at risk of losing his home, that he had no family support, that he was barely scraping by. All while I was sending him $2,000 a month. When she finished, I felt hollowed out. How much? I asked quietly. I'm not able to share exact figures yet, she said, but it's significant. The board is meeting today. I wanted you to be aware. After we hung up, I sat there in silence. It wasn't just that he'd used me. It wasn't just that he'd mocked me for it. He had taken money from people who genuinely wanted to help. People who trusted him. People who probably had far less than he did. I called Tessa immediately. He was taking money from the church, I said as soon as she answered. What? 3 years. While I was paying his mortgage. There was a pause, then a quiet, furious laugh on the other end. That's not just cruel. That's criminal. I know. How are you holding up? I searched for the answer. I don't know. I feel vindicated, and sick, and guilty, and angry. All at the same time. You didn't cause this, she said firmly. You just exposed it. By noon, the story had spread beyond my control. Screenshots of the video and payment receipts were circulating. My father posted on social media, playing the wounded parent. When your own child betrays you and spreads lies to destroy your reputation, you realize you raised a monster. The comments were split at first. Some defended him automatically, repeating the same tired lines about family loyalty and ungrateful children. But then people started replying with screenshots. Receipts. The video. Questions he couldn't answer. I closed the app. Watching strangers argue about my pain felt surreal. At 2 p.m., my brother showed up at my apartment. I knew it was him before I looked through the peephole. He had that posture, that aggressive stillness that always meant trouble. Maya, he shouted, pounding on the door. Open up. I didn't. You think you can just hide? He yelled. You've ruined everything. Go away, I called back. He kicked the door once, hard enough to rattle the frame. Dad might lose the house because of you. No, I said, my voice shaking but loud. He might lose the house because he can't pay his own mortgage. There was a long silence, then his voice dropped, sharp and dangerous. He's talking about ending it. The words hit me like a punch. What? I whispered. He's drinking nonstop, my brother said. He says he has nothing left. If something happens to him, that's on you. My heart pounded. Fear surged, tangled with anger. If he's suicidal, he needs professional help. That's not something I can fix. You did this, my brother snapped. You wanted to play victim. Congratulations. Before I could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed down the hallway. Building security. Someone must have called. One of them told my brother he needed to leave or the police would be called. He glared at the door like he could burn through it, then stormed off. I sank to the floor, shaking. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying his words. Suicide. Blame. Guilt wrapped around my ribs like wire. Was this manipulation? Or was it real? The next morning, I got a call from a lawyer. He introduced himself calmly, explained he represented my father, and accused me of defamation and harassment. Said I'd destroyed my father's reputation and emotional well-being. Said they were prepared to sue unless I issued a public apology and retraction. I almost laughed. Everything I shared was true. Documented. Recorded. I told him that. He told me truth didn't matter if it caused harm. I hung up and called Tessa again, my hands shaking. He's trying to scare you, she said. You need your own lawyer. Immediately. By that afternoon, I was sitting in a small office across from a woman named Grace. She had sharp eyes, a calm presence, and no patience for nonsense. She read through everything carefully. The receipts. The video. The messages. When she looked up, her expression was clear. He doesn't have a case, she said. Truth is an absolute defense. If anything, he's the one exposed legally. Especially if the church pursues fraud charges. Fraud. The word settled heavy in my chest. So what do? I asked. You protect yourself, she said. Document everything. Don't engage directly. And if he escalates, we're ready. As I left her office, something inside me hardened into resolve. I'd spent my whole life reacting to his moods, his anger, his disappointment. I wasn't doing that anymore. That evening, my phone rang again. This time, it was my uncle. His voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. I should have said something, he admitted. That night. I should have stood up for you. I'm ashamed that it took all this for me to realize how wrong it was. I closed my eyes. Thank you, I said. That means something. After we hung up, exhaustion washed over me. It had been less than 48 hours since I'd clicked send, and everything had already changed. But beneath the exhaustion, there was something else. Power. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind that comes from finally refusing to carry someone else's shame. That night, I pulled out an old photo album. Pictures from before my mother died. Her smile. Her arms around me. I wondered what she'd say now. And for the first time, I felt like I already knew the answer. The next morning felt unnaturally quiet, like the air itself was holding its breath. I woke up before my alarm, heart already racing, my phone still face down on the nightstand where I'd left it. For a moment, I considered not checking it at all. Pretending none of this was happening. But that was no longer an option. It never really had been. When I finally picked it up, there were new messages waiting. Some were angry, predictable, sharp words meant to cut me back into place. Others were softer. One was from a woman named Margaret, a name I recognized instantly but hadn't heard in decades. She had been my mother's closest friend. She asked if she could call me. We spoke for nearly an hour. Her voice was gentle, careful, like she knew every sentence carried weight. She told me things about my mother I'd never known. About how my father used to speak to her. About how small he made her feel. About the nights she cried in the kitchen after everyone went to bed. She stayed because of you, Margaret said quietly. She was terrified of what would happen to you without her there. I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight, raw. She worried about you, Leah. She said you had her heart. That you tried too hard to please people who would never be pleased. When we hung up, I sat there staring at the wall, everything suddenly clearer and more painful all at once. This wasn't new behavior from my father. It was just the first time I'd stopped absorbing it quietly. That afternoon, my lawyer called again. The church had finished their internal review. The amount my father had fraudulently received was nearly $50,000. They were demanding repayment in full and had referred the matter to local authorities. I thanked her, then sat in silence. I thought about the people who had donated to that fund. Elderly couples. Single parents. Families who had given what little they could because they believed they were helping someone in genuine need. And all the while, I'd been covering his mortgage. That evening, my brother showed up at my workplace. I hadn't even seen him enter the lobby before my coworker rushed over, her face pale. She whispered that someone was asking for me and refusing to leave. I knew it was him. When I stepped out, he was already pacing, jaw tight, eyes blazing with anger and desperation. "You've gone too far," he said. "Dad's falling apart. He did that to himself. You humiliated him. You exposed him. The church kicked him out. That wasn't my doing. That was his." He stepped closer, lowering his voice like he was sharing a secret. "He's talking about killing himself." The words hit me hard, like they were meant to. "If that's true," I said slowly, "then he needs professional help. Not money. Not silence. Not me sacrificing myself again." "You're cold," he snapped. "You always were." Something in me finally snapped too. "No," I said. "I was conditioned. There's a difference." Security intervened before things escalated further. My brother left shouting threats that echoed long after he was gone. That night, I filed a report. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I needed safety. The following day, Grace helped me file for a restraining order against my brother as well. His behavior had crossed too many lines. While we were finishing the paperwork, she paused and looked at me carefully. "There's something else," she said. "If this goes to court, more people may come forward. That happens sometimes." I didn't realize how true that would be. The message came from my cousin Julia. She asked to meet for coffee. Said there was something I needed to know. Something she'd kept buried for years. When she told me, my world tilted. She had been 16. Staying at our house while her parents were away. My father had crossed a line that should never be crossed. Touching her. Sitting on the edge of her bed. Pretending it never happened the next day. When she told her mother, she was told to stay quiet. That it would destroy the family. I felt sick. Everything clicked into place. The cruelty. The entitlement. The way he viewed women as things to be used, controlled, silenced. Julia told me she was ready to testify if needed. That she was done protecting him. After we parted ways, I sat alone in my car for a long time, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to breathe through the weight of it all. This wasn't just about money anymore. It never had been. Grace listened carefully when I told her. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, her face was grave. "If this goes public," she said, "it ends everything for him." I nodded. "Then that's on him." The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal steps, documentation, police reports, and phone calls I no longer answered. My father sent a handwritten letter begging for forgiveness. Promising change. Promising remorse. I read it once. Then I put it away. It wasn't remorse. It was fear. When the foreclosure notice arrived, I felt a brief ache for the house that had once been my mother's. But not for the man who'd lost it. He had burned every bridge himself. The court date came faster than I expected. Sitting in that courtroom, listening to lawyers speak in measured tones about my pain, my money, my family, felt surreal. Like watching someone else's life play out on a screen. My father looked smaller than I remembered. Not weaker. Just exposed. When it was over, when the judge dismissed his claims and allowed the criminal investigations to proceed, I walked out into sunlight that felt brighter than it ever had before. Reporters asked questions. I answered simply. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the truth. And the truth had finally spoken for itself. That night, I slept for the first time in weeks. Not because everything was fixed. But because I was no longer pretending it was my job to fix it. The weeks after the court appearance felt unreal, like I was moving through a version of my life that no longer belonged to me. Things didn't explode anymore. They collapsed quietly. My father stopped posting online. His accounts went silent after comment sections turned against him. People who once defended him disappeared. Friends he'd known for decades stopped returning his calls. The church finalized its decision and formally banned him from attending services while the legal process moved forward. The place where he'd built his public image of respectability closed its doors to him without ceremony. The house followed soon after. The foreclosure notice arrived in the mail one afternoon, thick and official, the kind of envelope that changes everything the moment it's opened. I didn't feel relief when I read it. I felt distance. Like watching a storm pass through a town I no longer lived in. My uncle called a few days later to tell me the house would be auctioned in 6 weeks. There was nothing anyone could do to stop it now. My father didn't have the money. His lawyer had dropped him. The church restitution alone would drain whatever he had left. He's not doing well, my uncle said quietly. Drinking a lot. Barely sleeping. I know, I said. But I can't save him. I understand, he replied. And for the first time, I believed him. My brother disappeared for a while after the restraining order paperwork was filed. No calls. No messages. No sudden appearances. The silence felt uneasy at first, like the calm before something worse. But slowly, I realized it was just absence. And absence was safer than chaos. Julia and I stayed in close contact. We talked often. Long conversations that wandered from anger to grief to disbelief at how much we'd normalized growing up. She told me about the anxiety she'd carried for years, the way she'd learned to stay small, to stay quiet, to avoid drawing attention. I thought it was my fault, she said once. Like I'd misunderstood something. No, I told her. You were a child. He was an adult. That's the only thing that matters. Saying it out loud felt like reclaiming something stolen. At work, things began to stabilize. The initial curiosity faded. People stopped whispering. My boss checked in once, asked if I needed flexibility or time off. I didn't. What I needed was normalcy. Structure. A place where my worth wasn't constantly questioned. Then, unexpectedly, opportunity arrived. My manager called me into her office one afternoon. I assumed it was about deadlines or staffing. Instead, she closed the door and smiled. We've been watching your work closely, she said. There's an opening for a senior role. More responsibility. Better pay. A lot more visibility. We'd like you to consider it. I felt stunned. I'd spent so many years shrinking myself financially, emotionally, professionally, so someone else could stay comfortable. I'd never imagined being seen like this. I'd like that, I said. When the offer came through officially, I sat in my car and cried. Not out of sadness. Out of release. I was finally investing in myself without guilt. The house sold at auction a month later. It went for more than the outstanding mortgage. After fees and penalties, my father walked away with some money. Not much. But enough to survive if he chose to. He didn't choose wisely. The criminal case moved forward quietly. No dramatic courtroom scenes. Just paperwork, interviews, evidence. He eventually pleaded guilty to a reduced charge and accepted probation and restitution. Jail time was avoided. Accountability was not. When I heard the news, I felt nothing. No victory. No satisfaction. Just finality. My brother reached out once after that. A long message. Defensive at first. Then confused. Then angry. Then something close to honest. He admitted he hadn't known about the church money. Hadn't known how much I'd paid. Hadn't wanted to know. I guess it was easier to believe you were just dramatic, he wrote. I didn't respond. Not every realization deserves a reply. As months passed, my life grew quieter. Healthier. I moved into a better apartment with large windows and real sunlight. I bought furniture I liked, not what was cheapest. I traveled for the first time without anxiety about money. I started therapy seriously. Not crisis sessions. Maintenance. healing. And slowly, I stopped feeling like I was waiting for something bad to happen. One afternoon, my uncle sent a message I hadn't expected. "Your dad asked about you." I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "What did he ask?" "If you were okay." That was all. I felt a flicker of something then. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Just acknowledgement. I replied, "I'm fine." And that was true. He died 3 years later. Liver failure. I heard about it from a cousin. There was a short service. Few attendees. No eulogy that mattered. I didn't go. I'd already mourned the father I never had. There was nothing left to bury. The weeks after his death were strangely peaceful. Like a chapter closing softly instead of slamming shut. I started writing. At first, just for myself. Pages and pages of things I'd never said. Then I shared a piece online. Just one. About boundaries. About family. About walking away. People responded. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. Stories poured in from strangers who had lived versions of my life. Who had been the responsible ones? The quiet ones. The ones who gave and gave until there was nothing left. I realized something then. What I'd done wasn't revenge. It was truth. And truth has consequences. Some people call that destruction. I call it freedom. By the time winter came, my life barely resembled the one I'd been living a year earlier. The noise had faded. The constant anticipation of another call, another threat, another attempt to pull me back into chaos was gone. For the first time I could remember, my phone was just a phone, not a source of dread. I settled into the new role at work more easily than I expected. The confidence surprised me at first. I kept waiting for someone to question whether I deserved the position, to hint that I was taking up space meant for someone else. That voice had lived in my head for so long that silence felt unfamiliar. But no one questioned me. They listened. They trusted my judgment. They relied on me. Each small success rewired something inside me. I stopped apologizing for taking up time in meetings. I stopped second-guessing emails before sending them. I stopped shrinking my accomplishments to make other people comfortable. I hadn't changed. I'd just stopped carrying someone else's shame. Julia and I met often. Coffee turned into long walks. Long walks turned into dinners. We talked about everything we'd buried for years. The moments we'd laughed off. The instincts we'd learned to ignore. "It's strange," she said once. "How much of my life was shaped by something I was told to forget?" I nodded. For me it was being told I was difficult. Ungrateful. Too much. I built my whole identity around proving I wasn't. Neither of us needed to say his name. Healing wasn't dramatic. It didn't happen in breakthroughs or grand realizations. It happened in ordinary moments. Sleeping through the night. Eating without guilt. Making plans without fear they'd be disrupted. I started therapy twice a week for a while. The work was exhausting. Uncomfortable. Necessary. My therapist once asked, "What do you think you owe your family now?" I thought about it for a long time. "Nothing," I said finally. And for the first time, that answer didn't scare me. The restraining order against my brother was approved without contest. He never showed up to the hearing. Never contacted me again. I heard through my uncle that he blamed me for everything, that he said I'd ruined his life. I didn't argue with ghosts. My father faded from conversation almost entirely. People stopped asking about him. The story became old news. New scandals replaced it. That's how it always goes. What stayed was the shift inside me. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped justifying my boundaries. I stopped feeling responsible for other people's discomfort. One evening, I was sitting on my balcony watching the city lights when a message came through from someone I didn't recognize. It was a woman in her 40s. She said she'd read my post and hadn't spoken to her mother in years because of similar abuse. I thought I was heartless, she wrote. Your story made me realize I was just protecting myself. I read that message 3 times. That was when I understood something important. What I'd done wasn't just for me. It had given permission to others. Spring arrived quietly. I traveled for the first time without checking my bank balance every hour. I bought plane tickets without calculating how much guilt they would cost. I sat on a beach with a book and felt something close to peace. One afternoon, my uncle called to tell me my father had been hospitalized again. Complications from years of drinking. The doctors didn't sound optimistic. I thanked him for telling me and hung up. I didn't rush to the hospital. I didn't feel cruel for not going. I felt finished. When he died, there was no dramatic closure. No last words. No reconciliation. Just a phone call and a fact. I grieved what never was, not what ended. After that, something inside me finally relaxed. The tension I hadn't known I carried released all at once. I slept better. I laughed more. I planned farther into the future. I started writing regularly, not as therapy anymore, but as purpose. The blog grew slowly, then suddenly. Messages poured in from people across the country. Across the world. Different stories. Same pain. Same relief when they realized they were allowed to walk away. I never called it revenge. Revenge implies anger. This was clarity. I had told the truth. And once the truth was out, everything else followed naturally.